My name is Ana Elena González Treviño, and I am the director of UNAM UK, Center for Mexican Studies. This is an office that the National Autonomous University of Mexico opened in the UK, in King's College London, which is where we normally work. And we promote academic exchange, student exchange, and academic collaboration. But at the same time, we promote Mexican culture, and we are delighted to find such a treasure as what Timothy Ades has done with his translation of Alfonso Reyes and his lovely book, Miracle of Mexico, which is the reason why we are together tonight. I will introduce Timothy initially, as well as my friend Raúl Cruz, who knows a little bit more, well, quite a lot more about Alfonso Reyes than I do. And afterwards, I'll leave the floor to Timothy so that he can share how he got to this point of translating Reyes and having this wonderful book published. Timothy Ades is a British rhyming translator, which means that he preserves both the meter and the rhyme scheme of the poems he translates. And this is, I find, quite extraordinary. I am very fond of poetic form myself, and I realize that most translations just don't care enough about form, which I find is fundamental to the experience of poetry. So I'm really happy to have found this artist who is still tackling the difficulties of form. Miracle of Mexico was published by Shearsman in 2019, and it is a bilingual compilation of poems by Alfonso Reyes, who is a Mexican polymath who was born in Monterrey in 1889, and he died in 1959. Well, Timothy Ades has also translated works by Antonio Venegas Arroyo, Ramón López Velarde, and Ricardo López Méndez, among others. He is also, and that is something I'm also very fond of, an experimental poet, an Oulipian poet from the Oulipo, no? The Ouvrier de Littérature Potentielle. And he has published ingenious collections such as Loving by Will, which is a constrained poetry version of Shakespeare's sonnets, rendered entirely without ever using the letter E, which is fantastic, extremely difficult task. He has won many different awards, both as a poet and as a translator. For instance, he won the John Dryden Prize for Victor Hugo's Moscow, Waterloo, St. Helena, and he won the TLS Premio Valle Inclán for Homer in Cuernavaca. This Premio Valle Inclán is a literary translation prize awarded by the Society of Authors for the best English translation of a work of Spanish literature. And my friend Raúl Cruz Villanueva is presently working as a digital publisher, but he is a specialist in post-revolutionary Mexican poetry. This is not an academic event, so we are not going to have any academic language at all. We just wish to have another person who enjoys Alfonso Reyes equally or almost equally as Timothy, so that we may have an interesting talk. It's going to go like this. First, Timothy is going to tell us a little bit about how he got to this point, and how he chose Alfonso Reyes and how he decided to do this translation, with occasional commentary from myself and from Raúl. And afterwards, we are going to open the floor for all of you to ask questions or make any comment that you wish. Okay, thank you very much. Please, if you are not speaking, keep your microphone off. Your camera, you may do as you wish. You may have it on or off as you wish. And I think we are ready. Timothy, welcome. Many congratulations for this feat of translation. Many congratulations for your awards. And tell us about it. Can you tell us how you got to translating Alfonso Reyes, or your trajectory as you wish?
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be speaking at this occasion. Thank you, Anna Elena, and thank you, Unam. Let me start with a bit of autobiography. As a young man, I studied Latin and Greek, ancient Greek. When I was about 22, the penny dropped that they're dead languages. I was already good at French, so I thought, what shall I do with the Latin? And I realized that if all those countries in the atlas are real, that I should go for Spanish. And so after a long and roundabout career, I turned into a poet, but especially and really only a translating poet. And I mainly translate from French. Spanish is my second language. I also do German, but I have no books in that language. And so how I came to Alfonso Reyes? Well, firstly, I found Mexico more exciting than Spain and more exotic. I was even there for immediately after my honeymoon because I found myself in that part of the world. And now Anna Elena just mentioned 3 other poets that I've translated, but I've done about 1 poem of each of them, and she chose the ones that happen to be Mexican. But even in Spanish, I have an entire book from Venezuela, which is Florentino y el Diablo by Alberto Arbelo Torrealba. So that's another thing. Now, many years ago, 20 years ago, I was lucky enough to win, as she said, the Premio Valle Inclán prize of the Times Literary Supplement for a part of this book of Alfonso Reyes. And how I had discovered him. Well, we have a certain amount in common. We were very fortunate, both of us, in our education, which can only be called privileged. He knew Latin and Greek. He also translated from English, which I don't need to do, and from Russian, which I couldn't possibly do. But while always remaining very much a Mexican. And I discovered recently what Octavio Paz had to say about him, which is in the short version: the love of Reyes for language, for its mysteries, is more than an example, it is a miracle, which is why I called my book Alfonso Reyes, Miracle of Mexico, because I'm very much aware that most people, even well-informed people in Britain and America, have not heard of Alfonso Reyes, but they have heard of Octavio Paz. And I hope to add him to the, if you like, to the canon where he should be. So the very first, what often happens with me is I discover a poet, because as I said, I studied Latin and Greek. I have not studied Spanish literature. I have not studied French literature. I have no academic duties of writing prose about those literatures, researching them, or reading this rather similar works of students. So I discovered him in the Penguin book. I think it was the Penguin book of Spanish verse, where he had 2 poems, a pair of sonnets called Cruz y Cara del Cacto. I wasn't going to read them, but I feel it's correct to start off with that. And because I've been encouraged to go on a bit today and expand. So it's a pair of sonnets called Cara y Cruz del Cacto. Cara y Cruz means face and cross, but what that means is heads and tails. Face, not Virgil's olive tree of Rome, for forcing locks and filleting, a skyhook and a scaffolding the gardener's neck is dangled from. Why is it Mexico has spawned anger, the viper and the spike, the twisting reed that forms a pike, the talon on the gauntlet hand? The crude ore beckons us to come and face our harsh mythology beyond the honey and the comb. So dismal is our alchemy, our native stone congeals with blood that rises in a yellow cloud. Cross. Immovable and never old sun riddle of infinity, that which the closely watching eye refines to green and mellow gold. The serpent too, composed and regal, glass of its own first crime, comprised in the myth cactus, immunized from its encounter with the eagle. In solemn dusk, in somber dale, beside the snowdrift, up so high that time refracts and light distends, Eve stoops above her mate and male to soothe his brow with sympathy, yet man and serpent greet as friends. A somewhat impenetrable poem, and certainly not what the Mexican Tourist Board ever says. But that was the one that got me going with Reyes. And now I'd like to read the one when I won this prize, which is still a major award that I've received. I read this one on the prize day, and it comes from Homero in Cuernavaca. The thing there is that Reyes translated a great deal of Homer's Iliad into rhyme verse. And in the course of doing that, it was at the end of his life, in the course of doing that, he wrote short poems of commenting and considering his reaction to Homer's work. And this one is called A Metaphor. The lily-voiced cicadas is a saying found in Homer. It gives the teacher problems, the translator melancholia. The boldness of this lyrical and voluntary bloomer has piled up quite a congeries of glosses and of scholia. There's a tag of Apollonius that has the self-same metal, and something in old Hesiod whose tang might correlate. I don't believe that any turn of phrase can turn out better. Let each of us pass judgment as our conscience may dictate. Didn't some daring modern type bring up the scarlet clamour of trumpets? Didn't someone else with perfect sense and grammar go on about the black pounding rhythm of the drummer? The transference of senses and the colours of the vowels. Excuse the hollow jargon if I talk of synesthetics, the songs of Maldoror, the surreal, the super real. We're stirring up the hornet's nest. Their heart is hardly Dada's, so let's say it loud and clear against the fretting of the critics. Bravissimo, Homer, for the lily-voiced cicadas. And from the same series is one about his father, who will have to be mentioned sooner or later. His father was General Bernardo Reyes. He was the Minister of Interior and the strong man, if you like, of the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz. His actions were, I think, mainly against indigenous peoples. Anyway, when the Mexican Revolution came, Bernardo Reyes was put into prison, and then he was let out and thought that was a cue for him to take over the government. So he advanced with a troop of soldiers across that great big square towards the presidential palace, not perhaps the way to go about it, and was shot dead from the windows. Alfonso Reyes was 20 years old at the time, but nonetheless, he became the great man of letters of the newly progressive country. He was a great networker, as well as being a brilliant writer. Borges called him, I think, the finest writer of Spanish prose of any age, or certainly of that century, to say nothing of his verse. And he combined with the other writers to take the ball forward. And he did the same in Spain, because he was sent there as a diplomat, and there he founded an Athenaeum. He founded one in Mexico as well. He founded various lasting institutions of that kind. So in Homer and Cuernavaca, he has a poem headed On My Father. And again, it's a sonnet. Caesar and Alexander and captains of that kind were noted for their valor and sometimes for their prudence. And I found in my father, like an ill-defined inheritance, the free-ranging breath of that rushing mighty wind. Once to Rodrigo de Vivar I gave a slave's devotion, toiling to tumble into prose, his verses and his essence. The shade of my father, like an ever-watchful presence, was El Cid in person, in every word and motion. Voyaging through the Iliad, I see it there today, Odysseus and Achilles, audacious and choleric. My father takes them over, takes unopposed command. Through him I lived with battle, the noise, the hand-to-hand. To call up deeds of daring, I inwardly portray the image of his courage that was warlike and heroic. So he wrote a sonnet much later, directly addressing his father's death. But at the time, he wrote a sonnet called, not a sonnet, but a long and grandiloquent poem called Ode on the Death of Tolstoy. He used all kinds of, every kind of meter or none in his poetry, and every kind of style. He was completely open on that, or if you like, extremely versatile. But that one of the Death of Tolstoy is in the grand manner and is the only one I would describe in that way. So I'd like to come to something rather light, which is headed, that is called Celeste Adelaida. And opera lovers will recognize the reference to Verdi's aria Celeste Aida, sung by Caruso and others, but not by me. Heavenly Adelaida. I'll say it in Spanish, it's short. Han me dicho, Adelaida, que es tu mente muchas tintas mezclar en el tintero. Y si esta vez no soy impertinente, no veo cómo puedo ser sincero. Necias habladorías de la gente, con 7 amantes piensan que exagero. ¿Por qué aceptas a Luis? Es mi pariente. Y a Filemón es un casetillero. Y a Juan, tener un viejo es conveniente. Y a Sebastián, por asno con dinero. Y a don Fermín, porque es hombre influyente. Y a Paquiro es gran torero. Y a mí, ¿por qué? La cosa es diferente. A ti, pues nada más porque te quiero. And in English, Della, they say you compliment your inkwell with a range of inks. So I shall be impertinent. A man must speak the way he thinks. How people gossip. Talk is poison. 7 lovers, why should I desist? Why Louis? Louis is a cousin. Why Philip? He's a journalist. Why John? Old man, a good possession. Fermin, a fixer, competent. Paco, torero of the season. Sebastian, clueless, opulent. What about me? That's different. I love you. That's the only reason. He could write the light stuff. He wrote a great many of these poems in the course of networking in literature. He received books from hundreds of writers, and he wrote them charming little rhymed thank you notes. And in Mexico City, the house he lived in is now called the Capilla Alfonsina. It's a center of studies based around him, and it's an enormous library above all, and a great deal of activity goes there. And until recently, his granddaughter, I think it is Doctora Alicia Reyes, who is no longer with us, presided there. So let me pause for breath and see if anyone would like to come in, and not least Raúl Cruz, who knows much more about Reyes than I do, and who has actually read most of his prose works. At any rate, you know, his books, it would take 2 or 3 meters of shelf space, and it's nearly all prose. And in fact, he's particularly a master of the essay. And one of his most famous essays is La Visión de Anáhuac, the vision of the Central Valley of Mexico, which is one of those which has been translated into English. So let me be quiet for a moment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Timothy. What a delight listening to you and how you have really made these poems yours. I think the sound of them is extraordinary, but I would also like to invite our audience to get the volume. I will be posting the website on the chat for Zoom, and we will post it as well in Facebook. And in the meantime, I would like to ask Raúl to tell us about Alfonso Reyes. Who is Alfonso Reyes, and why should we pay more attention to his work?
Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Malena. Timothy, it's a great translation. I rejoice in your work. It's really, really great thing you did, because Alfonso Reyes thought the translation as a part of a dialogue between the form and the content of the poems. Why is important Alfonso Reyes in Mexican culture? Well, it's because of a lot of reasons. Because as Timothy said, he was a man of institutions. He founded Colegio de México, he founded Colegio Nacional, he founded Fondo de Cultura Económica. He was singularly responsible for thousands of Spanish people that came in exile because of the Civil War in 1936 and 39. But about his work, he always believed himself a poet, even though he mostly wrote essays and mostly wrote prose, and is mostly remembered as an essayist. He always wrote in his letters that he was hurt that no one remembered his poetry, because that was what he thought was his greatest success and his greatest effort and his greatest work. He was a man that read everything, that he knew everything, and he was great quoting and paraphrasing works. Borges always said that no one like him was able to talk about the virtues of work and about an obscure song of the Middle Ages in Spain, and about a recipe that it's in a sonnet lost in the Arcipreste de Ita's work. His capacity of talking and writing and thinking the Mexican identity was in contraposition of all that was happening in the revolution. He was a man of literature, but he was a man of philosophy also, and a man of politics. Not as politics thought as a electoral process, but as the idea of the polis as in the Greek sense of the word. The idea that people created the state, the people work at that to make the state work better. And he was in constant clash with José Vasconcelos and with his other friends, but he believed that in his work, in his obras completas, he said always that between everyone we know everything, and I believe that that's the idea that we should remember him. He was really a true empath, an empath in his. If you read his letters, you can laugh, you can cry, you can do a lot of things about him, and the way that Timothy has translated his work is the same process as he translated the work of others. He checked the verse, he checked the rhyme, he checked the rhythm, and he tried to convert it in Spanish to the most closest form. And to respect that. In his translation of the Iliad, he says, well, I don't know how to speak Greek, but I can read it, and I can feel it, and I can gallop with it. And this is my work. And his Iliad is it's my favorite version because I love him, but it's also his most incomplete work. I always think of that as the passages of Walter Benjamin, that work that he could not finish, but you can extrapolate the work that should have been if he had the time to do it.
Thank you.
Timothy, I believe that Reyes would be happy as hell to hear an English version of his poems in the way that you translate it. It's incredible, and thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
work.
you very much. Thank you.
And that's it.
Let me read what in English what Octavio Paz had to say about Reyes. I'm very glad you said he thought his poetry was the main thing, because I've never heard anyone say that before. And for myself, I've read a lot of his poetry, not all of it perhaps, but I've certainly read very little of his prose because it's not my taste to do so. Anyway, here is what Octavio Paz said in a letter. Yes, we have some outstanding poets, a playwright, several critics, and 3 or 4 prose writers. But above all, we have a man for whom literature has been something more than a calling or a destiny, a religion, a man for whom language has been all that language can be, sound and sign, inert trace and wizardry, a clockwork mechanism and a living thing. In short, poet, critic, and translator. He is the writer, miner, craftsman, peon, gardener, lover, and priest of words. His work, various and perfect, is history and poetry, reflection and creation. It is a literature. Need I name this writer who, while remaining himself, is in himself a group of writers? Far from it. Everyone knows I refer to Alfonso Reyes. That's quite a strong tribute from an obviously extremely distinguished and brilliant writer who, like Reyes, was an ambassador. Reyes served in Spain and as head of mission, and in France, and then later in Argentina and Brazil. And one of his poems, in fact, there's a whole sequence set in Brazil. The capital in those days was in Rio, and the sequence is called Romances of Rio de Janeiro, Romances de Rio de Janeiro. So I'd like to read one poem from there. It's not a long poem, but it's longer than any I've read so far, and it's called Lucky Charms. He's listening to a fairly old woman explaining to a younger one about the mysterious magic talismans that go back to Africa. Lucky Charms. Take this and give it to no one. It's a secret all of your own. Let it hang on your bosom, for there it has to shine. From Mozambique and Angola, mysteries came to Brazil. 7 mysteries of handwork, which I shall now reveal. This raceme is the wood of the vine stock of Salvador. Have a thought for the blood in the earth's hidden store. They say this rattling pod with laughter drives out sadness, for inside it is the seed of the tree of madness. This is the jacaranda, wood of long life and years. The race of our sisters and brothers unceasingly endures. The thumb through the fist is a latch no one knows how to open. It closes the body to witchcraft and to the subtlest poison. You must obtain your water, never having to plead. With a bowl of hazel, you will find all you need. Here are the sun and moon. These and Solomon's seal and Don Pedro's gold and silver are riches and sleeping well. The bursting pomegranate that grows up at your door. If with this your life began, it's with this you shall expire. You've heard all that matters. I'll say it one more time. Then, to be sure you know it, you say it to me in turn. The crone gave her these counsels. She listened without a word. I listened as well, unsettled, couldn't laugh at what I'd heard. That's a sequence of, I think it's 11 times 13 lines, short lines. I do rhymes, and the English language, we have a great many vowel sounds, so it's not so easy to get a rhyme as it is in Spanish or Italian. In Spanish, you know, nada, armada, enchilada, and so on. And especially allowing that when the word ends in a consonant, it doesn't really count. It's only the vowel before that consonant that counts. So it was mentioned, Anna Elena mentioned that I wrote, I write stuff, I rewrite poems while leaving out the letter E. This is a trick I got from this French group, Oulipo. And the thing about that is it makes it much easier to get rhymes in English because it eliminates a lot of the smeared vowels, words such as smeared and vowel, and the words start to bang and clang, but that's a trade secret. And why do I do all this rhyming poetry? Well, it comes to me. I just have the knack of doing it. People tell me it's difficult. I don't find it that difficult. What I find difficult are things like cooking and gardening, but this I can do. And where do the words come from? The Greeks and Romans said it comes, all this comes from the muse. And I find that's as good an explanation as any. So it's what I do for better, for worse. Let me come on to a poem called Poetic Advice. Consejo poético. La cifra propongo y ya casi tengo el artificio cuando se abre el precipicio de la palabra vulgar. Las sirtes del bien y el mal, la torpe melancolía, toda la guardarropía de la vida personal. Aléjalas si procuras atrapar las formas puras. La emoción, pídela el número que mueve y gobierna al mundo. Templa el sagrado instrumento más allá del sentimiento. Deja el sordo, deja el mudo, al solícito y al rudo. Nada temas, al contrario, si en el rayo de una estrella logras calcinar la huella de tu sueño solitario. Poetic advice. I've cracked it, solved the matter, and almost grasped the artifice. I face the yawning precipice of ordinary chatter, the shoals of bad and good, the shiftless melancholia, the whole paraphernalia of daily personhood. Eschew these, to procure, to catch what forms are pure. Emotion, ask the number, world mover, primal governor. Temper the sacred instrument on the far side of sentiment. Discard the dumb, the deaf, the anxious, and the rough. No need to fear, far from it, if by the shining beam of some bright star or comet, you can compact the track of your especial dream. I'd like to read a poem called Prosaic Theory, which was recommended to me an hour ago. I was reminded, it's in my book. Raoul said that it was one that he knows. So here it is. Where I come from, a kid was cooked on the spit and another spit ripped at the charred outer bit. Much better's the way the gauchos all do it. The Tarots describe the custom as Jewish. They stand at the fire and eat with its skin the noble roast, biting the carcass straight in with their camp knife to cut it. What rustics can teach us. One day we should go without fork or knife for the peaceable life, like the sage in the barrel, or like any yokel. And who says the poets who manage to slacken the cords of instruction are turning their back on life history, wishing to talk about nothing, while only frequenting the purely unsure? I'd rather go wenching in literature. Not all must be based on the decimal system. I reckon in bushels, in rods, poles, and perches. I keep myself healthy. I like to combine the crude with the fine, and I mix in one salad. This much I know, the paladin ballad next door every day, with rarefied spirit of Gongora, flavored with Mallarmé. A vein in the gold, earth soaked in green sap, a statue half sunk in original stone, voice lost in the choir, the wax in pure honey, the common speech fused with the speech of rare metal like Christian and Moor. They fit rather well. And that's how life goes. Nothing there to deplore. Así va la vida y no lo deploro. Let me pause and see if anyone would like to come in with any questions or comments, please.
Well, I believe that Raúl worked a lot on this poem, and he is restraining himself not to pour out in praise of this poem, but I'm sure a short reaction you can share. Raúl,
Yeah.
can you speak a little louder because
Okay.
your voice
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a little low?
I will try to keep the mic close. I love that poem because it's the poetic ethos of Reyes. He believed that the high art or the highbrow art shouldn't be high and shouldn't be inaccessible to the people. It should be dialectical to the cultural traditions and the people's traditions. He in his essays he talks about how Góngora reappropriate all the popular traditions and all the popular verses and rhythms of the golden century of Spain, and how people and how critics and how essayists forget about it, and they talk about a Góngora that never existed. And he does that in his poetry. He does that in exactly that poem. He says that Góngora should be eating cow with the gauchos and should eat mate, should eat piloncillo, casi. No? He is not a populist poet. He is a poet that
I think you froze, Raúl. Something we've seen every now and then in these days, a poor connection. But hello, Emma Julieta. I'm very happy to see you here. I believe you have a question. Thank you, Raúl.
Yes, hello. I apologize for joining the meeting a little bit late. No, yeah, it was because of these technical problems as well. And I really thank you, Ana Elena, for organizing this great presentation. And I want to thank as well Timothy Ades for the great translation, the great work. My question goes, because I joined the meeting later, it's about this, the rhyming scheme and the issue of D and the group you mentioned, because it seems that Ana Elena mentioned that earlier, but I missed that because I joined, as I said, later. Could you just shortly go back to that?
Yes, it's a group in France called Oulipo, and that stands for Ouvroir de Littérature Potentielle, Workshop of Potential Literature. So what they like to do is to write literature under constraint, and it may be an alphabetical constraint or a numerical constraint. And one of the most favorite things is to not use the letter E, which is a letter in French, as it is in English. So there's a whole novel in French called La Disparition, without letter E, and it was translated into English again without letter E by Gilbert Adès under the name of A Void. And it is, you know, doing these tricks, it goes right back to the ancient world. In Alexandria in the year 0, roughly, people were doing this to parts of Homer, to the Iliad. They would rewrite, a man rewrote book Alpha because the Greeks used letters for numbers. So book 1, he rewrote without letter Alpha, book 2 without letter Beta, and so on, all the way through to the last letter Omega. And somebody else did that for the Odyssey. And Lope de Vega, for example, did this kind of thing. So it's not new, it's not exclusive to France, and let alone exclusive to me.
Yeah, that was a question. So that's your strategy as well. So you often kind of use that as a strategy. So that was my question, and yeah, thank
yes,
you.
I haven't done it with Alfonso Reyes, that would be unnecessary, but I have done it with Shakespeare, all his sonnets. I think it's a much more interesting version to have my versions alongside. It's more fun.
Okay, thank you.
There you are.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Julieta. Is there anyone else who would like to ask something or comment something? Adriana.
Sorry. Yes, I just want to say they are wonderful, wonderful translations, and I've had your book for a while, Tim, and it's just a delight. It's just a delight, the work you have done here. And I wonder if after the publication of the book, do you think that Alfonso Reyes is now better known among the British readers?
Well, I hope so. I've done what I can, but you know, poetry and bilingual poetry books do not have an enormous sale, and the publishers, in this case Shearsman, I have 4 or 5 different publishers. I've written 8 or 9 books, mostly from French, but the publishers, they produce a beautiful book, they do a very good job, and then they hold a launch party with maybe 30 people. But after that, the book and the writer, me, are on their own. And it is, so now I have 8 or 9 books to look after. It's like having children at 8 or 9 different schools in a way. They all have a different context. They are all niche products in different niches. But I hope to have done something for Alfonso Reyes at any rate.
Thank you.
And it would be good if the audience started getting your book. I remind you, I have typed in the website on the chat box, and so you can consult it to acquire it either through Shearsman if you're in the UK, or through Amazon or Barnes and Noble if you are elsewhere.
Yes, yes, it is printed in the United States as well as in England, so that if you're over there on that side of the Atlantic, you do well, as Ana Elena says, to go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon, which will greatly reduce the postage. And of course, I hope everybody listening in buys the book if they have not done so already, and then they can buy another copy, because there are plenty of people out there who are sufficiently near bilingual in English and Spanish and who would enjoy it. And also, I don't like to try to locate myself among British poets and English-speaking poets, but I think this work is relatively accessible and enjoyable on the spectrum compared to many. So let me see if I can, any more questions for the moment, perhaps? We have 10 minutes or so to go.
Yes, if you want to read another one, or tell us about your favorite, the one that gave you more satisfaction when you managed.
That's a difficult question. And when people say, which is your favorite language, it's always the one I'm working on at the moment. And that probably applies to the poems. I put more value on the ones that are more difficult to achieve as a translator. I overlook the fact that the recipient doesn't care about that. They only want to know the content. And I'm rather like a dumb channel, a medium through which the poem flows. I don't always understand it as well as the reader, and there's certainly the one which Raul has talked about. I didn't understand or pick up from the poem nearly as much as he did. That's not my role. My role is just to put it across in the English language. And I sometimes feel that that's a kind of passive process in which I am an instrument of somebody else. But there it is. There's so many good ones. And of course, I can't, in this event, in this 1 hour, show you more than a very small part. So you should go out and buy the book and read them all. And They're incredible. Let me do another one from Homero in Cuernavaca. Everybody knows the story of the Iliad. And this one is called End of the Iliad, al acabar la Ilíada. Desengañado Aquiles, solo a la muerte aspira. Su madre acecha, atónita, la hora malhadada en que habrá de ceder sus restos a la pira. Padre, hijo y esposa son grey abandonada. No queda quien comparta su duelo ni su ira. Su dulce sierva llora, mas llora al camarada. Atrida es falso, esquivo allante, y mal velada la sorda emulación que Diomedes transpira. Último caballero de la virtud antigua, le deja la venganza una embriaguez ambigua, y solo de la tumba espera la piedad. Ya le acude la gloria con los brazos abiertos, único amor que templa como un sol de los muertos, su frío desamparo, su arisca soledad. End of the Iliad. Achilles, disillusioned, to death alone aspires. His mother waits in anguish to see the fateful day when she must take his body and yield it to the fires. The wife, the son, the father, poor sheep that went astray. There's no one left to share in his pain and fierce reproof. His darling slave is mourning, she mourns her private loss. Atrides is deceitful, and Ajax holds aloof, and Diomede's ambition is ill-concealed and crass. Last of the ancient heroes, the bravest of the brave, there lies two-edged upon him the rapture of revenge. Only the tomb can honor, can grant him worthiness. Already glory beckons, with open arms attends, the one desire that tempers like sunlight on the grave, his icy dereliction, his stubborn loneliness. Oh, I didn't know I was going to read that.
Very moving, very strong.
Very strong indeed. Yes, and there are several in that sequence. There are three sequences in the book, I think. One is one is Rio de Janeiro, and one is frivolous, a very light but brilliant and extremely erudite sequence about banqueting and being. We go through the process. There's nothing special I want to read you there. I would like to read you one of the poems which he wrote as thank you letters for fellow writers. And I've chosen one which he wrote to Jean Cassou for the very personal and self-serving reason that I'm a translator of Jean Cassou. Jean Cassou is a French resistance man who was locked up in 1940, in the midwinter of 1941 to 42, when I was born. He was in a dungeon in Vichy, France, and he was making up in his head sonnets. He made up, he didn't write them because he had no pen and paper. He had, as Aragon said, only the night for his ink, only memory for his paper. So he made up 33 sonnets in his head, which I turned into English sonnets, and that's in a book. And he survived to be the man who created the Musée National d'Art Moderne in France, so a major cultural figure. Anyway, he was a writer, and this is what Reyes wrote to him. Triolet, to thank Jean Cassou for sending his book Sarah, which arrived after 2 or 3 other books from the same author. So he didn't quite hit it off with Reyes straight away. Joys enjoyed, kaleidoscope, yes, we are friends who share our joys. Every day a new surprise, joys enjoyed, kaleidoscope, yes. Sarah tops my pile with copious light and warmth and fantasies. joys enjoyed, kaleidoscope, yes, we are friends who share our joys. The first one in that series is for the Brazilian poet Ronald de Carvalho, who lived at Rua São Clemente 409. And he sent Reyes the second series of his book, Brazilian Studies. Reyes replies, the envelope, to Ronald de Carvalho, urgent, for he sails on the Lisbon line. The street is that of St. Clement, the number 409. Ronald de Carvalho, urgente, antes que el barco no los lleve, en la calle de San Clemente, número 409. The message, my friend, your Brazilian studies, the geometry is subtle, show us Brazil in full measure, like eyeglasses, much in little. Letans mea somnia sacro, I study in micro the macro, I read them from cockrow to cockrow. I find they give me great pleasure. I find in this second series, all your weight, all your wit, good value from Ronald de Carvalho, Rio, 1931. I read that poem in a pub in London, famous pub called the Troubadour, and I remarked that I was sure all three footballers, old Ronaldo, young Ronaldo, and Ronaldinho were all named after this Brazilian poet. Nobody believed me. Let me finish with one called Silence. Yes, Silencio. This voice is most slender, my choice to curse thunder, as honey most tender is physic for venom. In a bud that is primed on ephemeral dream, I inquire into ploys to get even with time. I counter the noise with silence, my choice. No less light is the spark that is dark for a moment, and love is still love by intensity silent. Each time, fewer words, and each word a verse, each poem a pulse, each pulse universe. A sphere now reduced to the span of its kernel, the moments immortal, the fleetings eternal. So sleep now, my song. You're a dart that fate nailed, whose flight plan has failed. You've lasted too long. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you. We have been so happy listening to you. All right. Perhaps you just wish to know that your son Robert is here. He is.
So he is
discreetly present, but I just wish to point it out. And we have time, well, we have 5 minutes before concluding our transmission. I wonder if there is anybody in the audience who would like to ask or comment. I see that Gabriel Porras is here as well. He is a lover of poetry, so I'm sure he is also appreciating your work very much. Well, I was going to ask something about whether you recognized tricks from any English language poet that appear in your translation of Reyes. I mean, do you hear, for example, Shakespeare or someone in some of the words or the images that help you solve the problem of translation?
Yes, as a general rule, if poets write, foreign poets who I translate, if they put in allusions which escape me because I haven't read their literature, that's not going to come through. But I feel it doesn't really deserve to. It would go, if anywhere, in a footnote. And anyway, there's a matter I don't know about. But if they are quoting something I should know, like the Bible or maybe Shakespeare, yes. And my words, because it's the same language as the Bible in English and as Shakespeare and Milton and so on, Tennyson is another favorite. I've read a number of English poets, not all that many because it wasn't my field, but those words are bound to echo. And when people say something is lost in translation, i.e. poetry, but also something is added, and all the nuances of English. And people often say to me, your version is better than the original, to which I think, well, of course it is, because you, the speaker, are English and you've used all these words a million times and it's all stuck in your brain there, whereas the foreign words are foreign to you and you've only maybe seen them a dozen or 100 times or none at all. I hope that's answered, but I can't give any particular, if I'd had notice, I could have perhaps found some suitable example of what you're saying. I'd like to see Claudio Mendoza is there, because only 2 weeks ago, it was with him that we read from Florentino e il Diavolo. There he is, Claudio. He was Florentino because he's a Venezuelan, but he lives in Michigan. So we were, there was a festival going on for 3 days in Michigan near Kalamazoo called Destination Venezuela. So it's very good to see you again, Claudio, without that great big hat which you wore for that performance. Any more questions?
We have 1 minute, Emma Julieta. Afterwards, we may stay on for a little further, but go ahead, Emma Julieta, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, it's just this. I love the brilliant way you read. Also, your reading is fantastic, both in English and Spanish. So could you just share with us, also, this is something you do often, and I hope Ana Elena can organize when this pandemic is over to bring you to Mexico and have a reading here with you. That would be great, not that many people so can enjoy this, no? So my question specific, so this is something you always do, like, also when you translate, you read that yourself aloud, but also in public. So this is something you always do, but you mentioned something now about theater. So just quickly, because we just have 1 minute, but could you share with us something of your experience doing this?
Well, I would like to do it more, and yes, I would love to go to Mexico, but it's a long way away, and especially in the current situation.
Yeah, when this is over.
Well, let's hope it is over sometime before.
Yeah, hopefully.
Not too long. But yes, I do, and some of those poems I've read maybe 4 or 5 times. There's Silence. It's a very useful one for closing a set of poems. Some of them I didn't know I was going to read until 5 minutes before, but I just read them, like the Achilles, which it took me by surprise by the power, and because I studied Homer in Greek, and I maybe suppressed that during my life. I said, well, that's all very well. But I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy making, and I think poems only live when you speak them and hear them. It's like a music score. It's all very well to have it on the page, but it only comes alive when you play it. And, although then again, some poems are written for the page, but some are better spoken. And I wouldn't want all the poems that are written for the page. I wouldn't want to hear them spoken. And I mean, 20 years ago, I would have run a mile from any poetry reading, but times have moved on. I'm a poet now. There it is. Thank you for that question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Timothy. We're delighted to have had you with us at the Center for Mexican Studies tonight, as well as the rest of the audience. We are going to stop the live transmission on Facebook, and afterwards you are welcome to stay, and we can pretend like this is a proper book launch, and you can talk to the author, the translator, poet, as if we were going on our way to the pub or something. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And let us give him a round of applause of sorts. You can turn on your microphones now if you wish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you.
Okay.
Bravo, gracias.
De nada, de nada.
It's been great, yes.
Muchas gracias.